Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling something I think we can all relate to. Fear of failure. I mean, come on. Who hasn't let that sneaky feeling stop them from going after what they
That's
want?
absolutely.
Uh,
Fear of failure is universal for sure.
it really is. So we're diving into this super insightful blog post today called Six Strategies to Overcome the Fear of Failure and Find Freedom
Okay.
from a blog called A Point of Light. And one thing that really hit home for me, and we'll get into all the details later, but
Yeah.
just this idea that the regret of not even trying something can be way heavier than, actually failing.
Ooh, that's good. That's a really powerful point right there. I mean, think about it, right? We often get so caught up in these worst case scenarios in our heads
Yeah.
that we end up letting those imaginary fears hold us back more than an actual failure ever could.
It's so true. The blog post digs into the psychology behind it all, too, talking about how perfectionism and fear of judgment, even like low self-esteem, all contribute to that fear of failure. It's like reading that was a bit of a ouch moment. You know what I mean?
Oh, totally. And those things are all so interconnected too. Like think about perfectionism for a second.
Right.
It sets this crazy high bar that's almost impossible to reach. So, yeah, no wonder failure feels inevitable.
Mm.
And when we tie our sense of worth to our achievements, any little setback feels like a personal attack almost.
Yeah, for sure. And it doesn't stop there, right? The blog post also points out how things like societal expectations
Yeah.
or even your childhood experiences can play a big role too.
Oh, for sure.
Like if you grew up with like super critical parents or in a crazy competitive environment, you're probably more likely to be afraid of messing up.
Right. Because those early experiences really do shape our beliefs
Yeah.
about failure and about how well we can actually handle it. Think about it.
Mhm.
If you were always being criticized or compared to others as a kid, well, you might start to believe that making mistakes is like the worst thing ever.
Oh, absolutely. And the author of this blog post,
Yeah.
they actually share a personal anecdote that really illustrates those potential regrets you can end up with later in life. They talk about how fear of failure kept them from doing things like making friends when they were a kid and
Mhm.
even applying for jobs that they like really wanted. And later on, they realized how much they regretted not even trying.
That's so powerful. It really highlights the cost of inaction.
Uh,
Sometimes that fear of failure,
yeah.
it can paralyze us to the point where we just avoid taking any risks at all.
It's kind of ironic, right? Because that can actually lead to even more regret later on. Like,
Yeah.
what if I had just gone for it?
Exactly.
So how do we like actually break free from this fear and start, taking action towards what we want?
Well, the blog post outlines 6 strategies, and they all kind of revolve around shifting our mindset
Hmm.
and building healthier habits. The first one, and this one really resonated with me, is focusing on the process, not just the outcome.
Ooh, okay. So is this like similar to mindfulness?
Yeah, there's definitely a connection there. It's
Yeah.
about detaching your sense of worth from things like praise or recognition,
Right.
those external validations.
Mhm.
Instead of obsessing over the end result, you could focus on the effort you're putting in, the skills you're developing,
Hmm.
and honestly, just finding enjoyment in the process itself.
Okay, so it's like finding the joy in the journey, not just the destination.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. Like, let's say you're learning guitar.
Okay.
You shouldn't be like fixated on becoming the next Jimi Hendrix right away. You
Right.
should enjoy the process of learning chords and practicing scales and seeing yourself improve over time.
Exactly. It's about tapping into that intrinsic motivation.
Mm.
When we're driven by things like curiosity, passion, or personal growth,
Mm-hmm.
those internal rewards, well, we're less likely to be totally paralyzed by the fear of external judgment. You know what I mean?
For sure. But how do we actually like cultivate that intrinsic motivation?
Yeah. That's a great question.
It's not always easy to just like switch it on,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm also curious, does this tie into the second strategy from the blog post at all?
Oh, absolutely.
Which is embracing failure as a learning opportunity. They mentioned this growth mindset,
Mhm.
which I've definitely heard of before, but maybe you can break it down for our listeners a bit.
Yeah, of course. So growth mindset is this belief that our abilities aren't fixed.
Right.
They can be developed through effort and learning.
Okay.
It's kind of like saying, okay, I may not be great at this yet, but I can improve with practice.
Got it.
And it totally ties into intrinsic motivation because when we adopt a growth mindset, we're more likely to focus on that process of learning and growing rather than just the outcome. We become less afraid of making mistakes, basically, because we see them as valuable feedback that helps us improve.
So instead of getting discouraged by setbacks, we can actually use them to our advantage. It
Exactly.
reminds me of that Thomas Edison quote
Oh, yeah, yeah.
about finding 10,000 ways that didn't work
Yes.
when he was inventing the light bulb.
He didn't see those 10,000 attempts as failures. They were just steps on the path to success.
Right.
And think about your own life. How many times have you failed at something
Oh, so many times.
before you finally figured out a way that worked? That's the growth mindset in action. And it applies to everything from learning a new skill to building a business to, I don't know, figuring out how to make the perfect souffle.
Oh, don't even get me started on souffles. I've had way too many pancake-like souffles to count, let me tell you. But it's true. Each one was a learning experience. Now, the blog post also had this line that really made me laugh.
Yeah.
And this goes back to that fear of judgment we were talking about earlier. They said, something that usually makes me feel better is realizing that literally no one else is thinking about a time you failed.
Oh my gosh, that is so true, isn't it?
Right.
We totally overestimate how much other people are scrutinizing our every move.
Yeah.
And it just adds to the pressure, right?
Yeah.
But thinking about it that way, it does make you feel a little lighter, huh?
It really does. Which brings us to the third strategy, building resilience and self-compassion. Basically, being kinder to ourselves, especially when we mess up.
And that is so crucial because instead of beating ourselves up over mistakes, we can practice self-compassion
Yeah,
by remembering that, hey, everyone makes mistakes.
for sure.
Failure doesn't diminish our worth as human beings. It's part of the process.
Totally. The blog post even suggests trying to laugh at your mistakes.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and I can see how a little humor could go a long way in, diffusing that negative self-talk.
Totally. Humor can help us reframe those setbacks, right?
Yeah.
Instead of dwelling on the negative, you can find the absurdity in the situation and move on with a lighter heart.
Absolutely, but it's not always easy to do that, is it? Especially
Yeah.
when you're feeling, discouraged or defeated.
Right.
So how do we actually shift our perspective in those moments? That's a good question.
And it makes me think about the next strategy, which is setting realistic goals and expectations.
Right.
I think that's where a lot of us trip up.
Yeah.
I know I do.
It's easy to get caught up in aiming for perfection or comparing ourselves to others. And then, yeah, of course, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment.
Yeah.
Setting realistic goals that actually align with our current abilities and resources, that's key to managing that fear of failure.
It's okay, I love a good analogy.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's like trying to climb a mountain.
Okay.
If you're just fixated on that daunting peak,
Mm-hmm.
you might get totally overwhelmed.
Right. And give up before you even start. But if you break it down into smaller, manageable steps, like base camp, then the next ridge, and so on, it feels so much more achievable.
That's a great analogy. And
Yeah.
you know what? Achieving those smaller goals actually builds our confidence
Oh, yeah.
and fuels our motivation to tackle the next challenge.
And that leads perfectly into the fifth strategy, which is all about gaining confidence through taking action.
Yes.
It encourages us to identify one small step we can take today
Today.
to confront our fear in a specific area of our life. I love that emphasis on taking action now,
Yes.
even if it's just a baby step.
Right. Because it's so easy to get stuck in analysis paralysis,
Yeah.
But ultimately, the best way to overcome fear is to just take action, even if it's a tiny step. And those small steps,
Yeah.
they create momentum.
Yeah.
And as we experience even those little successes,
Yeah.
our confidence grows,
Right.
making it easier to take on those bigger challenges we might have been avoiding before.
So it all starts with one small step.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
really does. It's like that saying, what is it? A journey of 1,000 miles.
Begins with a single step.
That's it.
Yeah.
And it's so true. Those tiny actions, they create this ripple effect. And before you know it,
You've made serious progress.
yeah, exactly. And that brings us to the final strategy, actually,
Okay.
from this blog post, which emphasizes, the importance of seeking support and learning from others.
Yeah.
We don't have to go through this alone, right?
I love that. It's like having your own personal cheering section. People who believe in you and encourage you and help you pick yourself up when you stumble.
Yeah, yeah.
The blog post specifically mentions avoiding people who project that unrealistic perfect success image.
Oh, totally. Because it's so easy to fall into that comparison trap,
Mm-hmm.
comparing ourselves to those who just seem to have it all figured out,
Right.
But the truth is, everybody faces challenges and setbacks.
Yeah.
Even those who seem, effortlessly successful, they've probably faced their own share of failures along the way. We just don't always see it, right?
It's about being authentic and recognizing that, failure, it's a universal human experience. It's not like a sign of weakness or inadequacy,
No.
but just a necessary part of learning and growing.
Absolutely.
So how do we actually find those supportive mentors and resources? Who should we be surrounding ourselves with?
Well, you can start by looking within your existing network, honestly.
Okay.
Like your friends, family, colleagues.
Yeah.
Are there people you admire who've overcome similar challenges? Don't be afraid to reach out to them. And just ask for advice or guidance. Sometimes the best mentors are already right there in our lives, right?
That's true. Yeah. And for those of us who maybe want to expand our network, are there other ways to, connect with potential mentors?
For sure. Networking events, workshops, even online communities. Those can be great places to connect with like-minded people and potential mentors. It's all about putting yourself out there and actively seeking support.
Yeah.
Don't underestimate the power of community.
So true. You know what else I find helpful? Books, podcasts, online courses.
Oh, yeah.
There are so many resources available these days where we can learn from the experiences of others and gain valuable insights.
Yeah.
Without having to reinvent the wheel.
Right, exactly. And, for those of you who are already familiar with the growth mindset, let's take it a step further. Right?
Okay.
How can we apply this not just to our personal goals, but to our work, our relationships, even our view of the world? It's about, adopting a more flexible and adaptable approach to life, embracing challenges as opportunities for growth.
That's such a powerful idea. And it makes me think about how, fear in some ways can actually be a good thing.
Whoa, okay. That sounds a little counterintuitive.
I know, right? But hear me out. I'm thinking about how fear in its most primal form
Yeah.
is a survival mechanism, right? It's designed to protect us from danger. Like if you're walking through the forest and you see a bear,
Oh, yeah.
that jolt of fear is going to make you run in the opposite direction.
That's a great point. It's about recognizing that fear itself isn't the enemy. It's how we respond to it that matters.
Exactly.
And sometimes that fear can actually be a signal
Oh, interesting.
that something is really important to us. Like if we're not at all afraid of failing at something, it might mean we're not that invested in it to begin with.
That's so true, yeah. So the key is not to eliminate fear altogether,
Right.
but to reframe it, understand it, and use it to our advantage. Maybe even make it our friend in a way.
I love that. Instead of letting fear dictate our actions, we can acknowledge it, respect it,
Yeah.
and then choose to move forward in spite of it. It becomes less about, conquering fear and more about developing a healthier relationship with it.
And as we practice facing our fears and taking action, we build that confidence and resilience, which makes it easier to confront future challenges. It becomes this positive feedback loop.
Oh, I love that.
The more we face our fears, the less power they have over us.
It's like a beautiful cycle of growth and empowerment. And it makes me think back to that initial point, about regret.
Yeah.
Sometimes the biggest regret isn't even the failure itself, but the fact that we let fear stop us from even trying.
So true. And I think that's something for our listeners to really reflect on. What are those dreams or goals that you've been putting off because of fear?
What steps have you been hesitant to take, and how can you apply these strategies we've been talking about to finally start moving forward?
Even if it's just one small step.
Because you are capable of so much more than you think. You have the strength, the resilience, and the resources to overcome your fears and achieve those dreams.
Don't let fear hold you back any longer. Embrace the journey, learn from your mistakes, and keep moving forward.
Remember, the world needs your unique gifts and talents.
As we're wrapping up this deep dive into conquering this fear of failure, I'm kind of struck by how much just reframing your perspective can change things. It's not about becoming fearless, right? It's about becoming fear aware and then choosing courage anyway.
I totally agree. It's like we've been saying, acknowledge the fear, respect its purpose, but don't let it be the one calling all the shots.
Right.
And this ties back to those 6 strategies, right?
Yeah.
Focusing on the process, embracing failure as a learning opportunity, building resilience, setting realistic goals, taking action, and seeking support. they all kind of work together, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
To help us create that healthier relationship with fear.
They really do. It's like building a toolkit almost
Yeah.
for navigating those, inevitable moments of doubt and uncertainty. And for our listener who's maybe feeling a little overwhelmed by all this information,
Yeah.
where would you suggest they start?
I'd say start small. Pick one strategy that really resonates with you and, experiment with it.
Okay.
Maybe it's focusing on the process instead of the outcome
Right.
for that next project you're working on, or
Yeah.
maybe it's identifying one small step you can take, like today,
Yeah.
to move towards a goal you've been putting off out of fear.
I love that. It's about taking action, right?
Yes.
Even if it's imperfect, even if it
Right.
feels, a little scary. And remembering that failure isn't the opposite of success.
No.
It's part of the journey.
It's a stepping stone.
Yeah.
And as we embrace that journey, learn from our mistakes, celebrate those successes along the way,
Yeah.
we build that confidence and resilience we need to keep moving forward.
This has been such an insightful conversation, and I hope our listener is feeling a little more empowered, I guess, to face their own fears and unlock their full potential.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts you want to leave them with?
Just this. You are capable of amazing things. The world needs your unique gifts and talents. Don't let fear hold you back from sharing them with the world.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep,